Picture this: you're walking through a dense forest, your boots crunching on fallen leaves, when suddenly your fingers brush against something cold and unyielding. You push aside the undergrowth, and there it is, a massive stone slab, its surface carved with strange, twisting symbols that seem to pulse with hidden meaning. Who left this here? What were they trying to say? And why has their message remained silent for centuries? This isn't just a scene from an adventure movie. It's the real-life challenge faced by archaeologists and linguists every single day. Across the globe, scattered like breadcrumbs from a lost feast, lie 24 untranslated stone inscriptions that defy our best efforts to understand them. These aren't just random scratches or decorative patterns, they're deliberate, sophisticated messages from civilizations long gone, cultures that thrived and then vanished, leaving behind only these cryptic whispers in stone. Consider the weight of that mystery for a moment. We live in an age where technology can translate languages in real time, where satellites can map ancient ruins hidden beneath jungles, and yet these stones stubbornly guard their secrets. Some inscriptions resemble known writing systems but twist just enough to be unrecognizable. Others are completely unique, their alphabets appearing nowhere else in the historical record. And then there are the symbols that seem to mock us, hinting at grand narrative stories of kings and gods, triumphs and disasters, but refusing to give up their truth. What if one of these stones holds the key to a forgotten empire, or the untold history of a people erased by time? The frustration is palpable, but so is the thrill, because every undeciphered inscription is a locked door, and behind it could be anything. That's why today's journey is so extraordinary. We're not just looking at 24 unsolved puzzles, we're stepping into a detective story that spans continents and millennia. From the jungles of Central America to the wind-swept cliffs of Scandinavia, these stones are more than artifacts. They're invitations. Invitations to wonder, to debate, to imagine. Some theories suggest these inscriptions could reveal lost spiritual practices or early scientific knowledge. Others speculate they might chronicle events so catastrophic they reshaped entire societies. And then there's the tantalizing possibility that a few of these stones were never meant to be read by human eyes at all. So grab your metaphorical explorer's hat, because by the end of this, you won't just see these inscriptions as academic curiosities. You'll feel the itch to solve them yourself. Let's begin. The Rosetta Stone gets all the glory, and for good reason. That slab of black basalt cracked the code of Egyptian hieroglyphs, giving us a backstage pass to an ancient civilization's thoughts, laws, and daily life. But what about the stones that didn't come with a cheat sheet? Scattered across deserts, buried in ruins, and half hidden in riverbeds are inscriptions that refuse to give up their secrets. These aren't just minor puzzles, they're full-blown enigmas, each with its own set of rules, its own private language. Take the Rongorongo tablets of Easter Island, for instance. Covered in intricate glyphs that march across the wood in precise lines, they look like writing, but no one's ever matched them to a spoken language. Or consider the Sutovo inscription in Bulgaria, where symbols carved into a cliff face resemble Greek letters, but twisted just enough to be meaningless. What's fascinating isn't just that we can't read them, it's that we can't even be sure what we're looking at. Are they religious texts, tax records, epic poetry? Without cultural context, these stones might as well be messages from another planet. And that's the heart of the problem. Translation isn't just about swapping symbols for letters, it's about cracking a worldview. The Rosetta Stone worked because it repeated the same message in 3 scripts, allowing scholars to triangulate meaning. but most untranslated inscriptions stand alone, orphaned from their original cultures. The Proto-Elamite script of ancient Iran, over 4,000 clay tablets exist, yet we've deciphered barely a fraction. The symbols change over time, evolving like a language no one remembers speaking. Even when inscriptions share visual traits with known scripts, like the Cascajal Block's Olmec symbols echoing later Mayan writing, the gaps are too wide to bridge. It's like hearing a faint melody through a thick wall. You recognize it as music, but the notes slip away before you can name the tune. What's worse, some inscriptions might be deliberately opaque. The Voynich manuscript, though not carved in stone, is a famous example. Its floral illustrations and looping script have resisted over a century of analysis. Could some stone inscriptions be ciphers meant only for elite priests or rulers? The Deciphering tablet from Greece, dating back over 7,000 years, bears markings that some argue are proto-writing. But without more examples to compare it to, the debate rages on. Every undiscovered inscription is a missing piece of the puzzle, and until we find more, or unearth a modern-day Rosetta Stone, these carved messages will keep their secrets locked tight. Yet that's what makes them irresistible. Each one is a frozen moment, a voice shouting across time in a language we strain to hear. The chase might be frustrating, but the reward, a glimpse into a lost mind, would be priceless. Among all the untranslated inscriptions haunting researchers, few are as visually striking or as stubbornly mysterious as the Rongorongo script. Picture wooden tablets and stone carvings covered in intricate glyphs, crescent moons with faces, crouching human figures, frigate birds with elongated beaks, all arranged in precise, alternating rows. At first glance, they look like art, but the patterns are too deliberate, too systematic to be mere decoration. This is writing, or is it? That's the question dividing experts. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, which offered a bilingual key, Rongorongo stands utterly alone. No parallel texts, no living descendants of its creators, just these haunting symbols waiting for someone to hear their voice. The sheer isolation of Easter Island makes the mystery even more profound. Imagine a society so remote, it developed writing without outside influence, one of only a handful in human history to do so. But here's the twist. By the time Europeans arrived in the 18th century, not even the islanders could read the tablets. Knowledge of Rongorongo had vanished, as if erased overnight. Some oral traditions suggest the script was sacred, used only by elite priests. Others hint it recorded genealogies or chants. But without a living tradition to guide us, every theory crashes against the same wall. We don't even know if these glyphs represent sounds, words, or entire ideas. What makes Rongorongo especially frustrating is how close, and yet how far, we are to cracking it. Certain glyphs reappear in predictable sequences, hinting at grammatical rules. Some tablets even seem to follow a reverse Boustrophedon pattern, where lines alternate direction like a plow turning at the end of a field. But just as patterns emerge, they dissolve. A single tablet might combine recognizable symbols, fish, tools, celestial bodies with abstract shapes that defy interpretation. It's like trying to read a poem where every third word is missing. Theories abound, of course. One bold hypothesis suggests Rongorongo isn't writing at all, but a memory aid for reciting oral traditions. Another claims it's a lunar calendar, tracking cycles of time. Then there's the chilling possibility that the script holds accounts of the island's ecological collapse, a warning carved in wood. But until another tablet surfaces, or a hidden Rosetta Stone emerges from the Pacific, Rongorongo remains a conversation where we've only caught every other word. And perhaps that's the allure. These glyphs aren't just a puzzle, they're a mirror. They reflect our own desperation to hear the voices of the past, even when they speak in whispers. While the Rongorongo script taunts us from its remote Pacific island, another great mystery lies buried in the dust of the Indus Valley, home to one of humanity's earliest urban civilizations. Imagine holding a soapstone seal no larger than a postage stamp, its surface gleaming with the image of a humpbacked bull and a row of tiny, elegant symbols. These aren't random scratches. The Harapan seals, as they're known, bear what might be the world's oldest undeciphered writing system, a script so concise and enigmatic that even the brightest minds in linguistics have thrown up their hands in frustration. What makes these seals so maddening isn't just their age, dating back over 4,000 years, but their sheer abundance. Thousands have been excavated from the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harapan, suggesting they were central to daily life. Some show mythical creatures, others depict elephants or unicorns. Yes, unicorns, but it's the script that captivates. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, which sprawl across temple walls and clay tablets, Harapan inscriptions are painfully brief. Most contain just 5 or 6 symbols, like a tweet from the Bronze Age. Is it a name, a prayer, a trader's mark? Without a longer text or a bilingual inscription, every theory hits a wall. The script's visual elegance only deepens the puzzle. Symbols resemble stick figures, fish, and abstract shapes, some so consistent across centuries that they must represent a codified system. But is it true writing where symbols match spoken words, or a proto-script for recording trade goods? Computational linguists have tried frequency analysis, mapping symbol patterns like cracking a cipher. Yet the results are inconclusive. Some sequences repeat, hinting at grammatical structure, but without knowing the underlying language, or even if it's related to any known tongue, the code remains locked. Then there's the cultural context. These seals weren't tucked away in temples. They were pressed into clay tags attached to bundles of cloth, grain, or pottery. Were they invoices, quality certifications, or perhaps ritual objects, their animal motifs representing deities? The unicorn symbol appears on nearly half the seals. Was it a royal emblem or a sacred symbol? The irony is crushing. We can map the Indus Valley's advanced drainage systems and standardized brick sizes, but their voices are silent. Recent breakthroughs offer glimmers of hope. AI algorithms have identified potential grammatical patterns, and some scholars claim partial decipherments, linking symbols to words in ancient Dravidian languages. But without a eureka moment like Champollion's with the Rosetta Stone, the Harapan script guards its secrets fiercely. Maybe the answer lies in an unexcavated warehouse, waiting to reveal a longer text. Or maybe these seals were never meant to tell stories, just to mark, to signal, to whisper fragments of a world we'll never fully hear. And that's the bittersweet thrill of archaeology. Sometimes the past insists on keeping its mysteries. If the Harapan seals are cryptic telegrams from the past, the Phaistos Disc is an entire unsent letter, burned around the edges, sealed with wax and addressed to no one. Discovered in 1908 in the ruins of a Minoan palace on Crete, this palm-sized clay disc is unlike anything else from the ancient world. Picture a circle about 6 inches across, its surface divided by spiral grooves that coil inward like a serpent's tail. Within each segment, 45 unique symbols, men with headdresses, birds in flight, shields, fish, even a beehive stand in neat rows, pressed into the clay with such precision they must have been stamped, not carved. That last detail is what keeps archaeologists awake at night. Stamping implies movable type, a technology not seen again until Gutenberg's printing press 3,000 years later. Why would Bronze Age craftsmen invent such an advanced technique and then never use it again? No other stamped inscriptions exist from this era, not even fragments. Was the disc a prototype, a royal vanity project, or proof of a writing system so rare its other examples crumbled to dust? Theories spiral as wildly as the disc's glyphs. Some scholars hear poetry in its symbols, suggesting it's a hymn to a forgotten goddess. Others see a practical tool, maybe a board game, with players moving tokens along the spiral path. Then there's the tantalizing idea that it's a coded message, its symbols standing for syllables in a lost language. One controversial study even claims it's a lunar calendar tracking celestial events. But without a second disc to compare it to, every interpretation feels like shouting into a canyon and hoping for an echo. What's most haunting isn't the disc's mystery, but its loneliness. The Minoans left behind frescoes of leaping dolphins and linear tablets, yet nothing resembling these stamped symbols. Were they borrowed from traders? Invented for a single purpose, the disc's clay holds fingerprints, literal and metaphorical, of a mind we'll never meet. Until another stamped message surfaces, this artifact remains a single page torn from a book we didn't know existed, and now desperately wish we could read. Buried beneath the earth in Veracruz, Mexico, for nearly 3,000 years, the Cascajal Block doesn't look like much at first glance, just a weathered slab of serpentine stone about the size of a laptop. But turn it over and history leans in close to whisper. 62 glyphs march across its surface in irregular rows, a corn cob, a throne-like seat, a beetle, an eye staring back through time. These aren't random doodles. Carved around 900 BC, this tablet might be the Rosetta Stone of the Americas. If only we could read it. The Olmecs, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, left behind colossal stone heads and jade masks, but their written words, if they had any, were thought to be lost. Then came the Cascajal Block, discovered in a quarry in the 1990s. Its symbols pulse with purpose. Some repeat in clusters, suggesting grammatical structure. Others depict objects so specific, a fish, a twisted cord, they must convey meaning beyond decoration. But here's the catch: unlike Mayan glyphs, which often pair images with phonetic cues, these symbols stand alone, silent. Is this true writing where symbols encode speech? Or is it proto-writing, a stepping stone between simple pictographs and a full-blown script? The block's context deepens the intrigue. Found near an ancient Olmec capital, it may have been a ritual object, its glyphs invoking gods or recording offerings. The corn motif hints at ties to agriculture, while the throne glyph could signal royal decrees. Yet without more examples, the Cascajal Block is a sentence without a paragraph, a glimpse of a language we can't reconstruct. Some scholars argue it's a dead end, a local system that never evolved further. Others see it as the spark that lit later scripts like the Mayans' intricate glyphs. What's undeniable is the block's gravitational pull. If deciphered, it could rewrite the history of writing itself, proving the Olmecs didn't just carve art, they crafted narratives. But until another tablet surfaces, these symbols remain a locked door, and behind it, a civilization's voice waiting to be heard. Buried in the mud of a Neolithic lakeshore in northern Greece, the Deciphering tablet might be the most important piece of firewood you've never heard of. Roughly the size of a hardcover book and carbon, dated to around 5,200 BCE, this waterlogged wooden slab is covered in strange, angular markings, lines that branch like tree limbs, crosses etched with precision, sequences that repeat in odd clusters. At first glance, they could be scratches from a tool, but look closer and something extraordinary emerges. These aren't random, they're deliberate. And if certain scholars are right, they might just append everything we thought we knew about the birth of writing. The implications are staggering. If these symbols represent a true writing system, they predate Sumerian cuneiform. the world's oldest known script by over 2,000 years. That's like finding a smartphone in a medieval castle, but here's where things get messy. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or even the Phaistos Disc, the Tartaria Tablet lacks context. No other tablets with matching symbols have been found at the site. No bilingual inscriptions, just this lone piece of wood, whispering secrets we can't quite decipher. Skeptics argue the markings are practical maybe tally counts for grain stores or ownership marks for tools. After all, the Neolithic world was one of firsts: first farms, first pottery, first permanent settlements. Why not first accounting, but proponents point to the tablet's sophistication. The symbols aren't just notches, they're arranged in linear sequences, some grouped in ways that suggest syntax. Could they record trades, rituals, a story? The debate hinges on a fundamental question: what separates writing from notation? If a symbol stands for 3 sheep, is that writing? Or does true writing require abstraction, symbols that convey ideas, not just quantities? The tablet's fragile state adds another layer of frustration. Preserved for millennia in anaerobic lake mud, it began deteriorating the moment it was exposed to air. Today, only casts and photographs remain, making fresh analysis nearly impossible. What if the symbols held phonetic clues now lost to decay, or cultural references we'll never recognize? Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the tablet's birthplace. Deciphering was no backwater. This lakeside village boasted raised wooden houses, advanced pottery, and evidence of long-distance trade. A society this complex might well have needed writing, or been on the cusp of inventing it. But until another tablet surfaces, the Deciphering markings remain a sentence fragment in a language we've forgotten. And that's the heartbreak of archaeology. Sometimes, the most revolutionary discoveries are the ones that raise more questions than answers. The truth might still be out there, buried in the Greek mud, waiting for the right hand to uncover it. High in the Rhodope Mountains of Bulgaria, where the wind carves its own stories into the cliffs, the Setovo inscription clings to a weathered rock face like a riddle etched in stone. At first glance, it looks almost familiar. Some characters resemble Cyrillic letters, as if someone started writing in a known alphabet and then veered off into the unknown. A looping symbol here, a jagged stroke there, all arranged in a tight cluster that feels intentional yet impenetrable. It's this tantalizing near legibility that drives scholars mad. The inscription isn't just a jumble, it's a code switching between the recognizable and the utterly alien. Local lore fuels the fascination. For generations, villagers whispered that the markings pointed to a hidden hoard of gold, buried by medieval kings or perhaps even ancient Thracians. Treasure hunters have scoured the area, chiseling at the rock in frustration. But the real treasure isn't metal, it's meaning. Could this be a boundary marker warning travelers they've entered sacred ground? A prayer frozen in time, or something far more personal, like a grieving father's epitaph for a lost child? The guesses span centuries. Some researchers insist the symbols are Proto-Bulgarian, dating back to the 7th century when Slavic tribes carved their identity into the land. Others spot traces of Greek or even Thracian influence, pushing the timeline back over 2,000 years. What makes Setovo uniquely frustrating is its isolation. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or the Harapan seals, there's no cultural context to anchor it. No pottery shards with matching symbols, no nearby ruins to suggest a temple or settlement. Just this one defiant message, daring us to misinterpret it. Modern technology hasn't helped. 3D scans and spectral imaging reveal the carving's depth and tool marks but offer no linguistic key. Closest breakthrough came when a linguist noticed that certain glyphs mirrored medieval Slavic numerals, hinting at a land deed or tax record. but the theory collapses as quickly as it forms, undone by symbols that resist any known system. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the inscription was never meant to be read at all. Some cultures created pseudo-scripts, decorative writing that mimicked the idea of literacy without conveying specific words. Could Satovo be a ritual object, its power lying in its mystery rather than its message? Or does it guard a truth so potent its cipher was designed to endure? For now, the rock keeps its silence, but every unanswered question is an invitation to look closer, to dig deeper, to listen for voices in the wind that still carry echoes of the past. Standing at the mouth of the Singapore River, where skyscrapers now cast shadows over bustling docks, the Singapore stone was once part of something far grander, a massive sandstone slab, roughly 10 feet wide and covered in cryptic symbols. When British colonists stumbled upon it in 1819, they found not just a rock but a riddle. The inscription, carved with precision, seemed to hover between familiarity and mystery. Some characters echoed old Javanese script, others bore a faint resemblance to Sanskrit, but as scholars soon discovered, this was no mere copy of a known language. It was something else entirely, a linguistic ghost haunting the edges of comprehension. What makes the stone so tantalizing isn't just its undeciphered text, but the tragedy of its incompleteness. In 1843, British engineers, unaware of its significance, blasted the slab apart to clear land for a fort. Only one fragment survived, a jagged piece now housed in Singapore's National Museum. The rest pulverized into rubble, taking its secrets with it. That surviving fragment holds roughly 50 characters, a mere whisper of what must have been a much longer narrative. Was it a royal proclamation, a religious hymn, a trader's ledger from a time when Singapore was already a thriving port? The stone's proximity to the water suggests it might have greeted sailors, a silent sentinel marking the entrance to a vibrant hub of commerce and culture. Efforts to crack the code have been as persistent as they've been futile. Early colonial scholars speculated it was a Hindu-Buddhist relic left by traders from Srivijaya or Majapahit. Others argued it could be an early form of Malay, a language with deep roots in the region. But every theory hits the same wall. The script doesn't match any known system closely enough to allow translation. Even advanced computational analysis, which has decoded other ancient texts, stalls here. The stone's symbols resist patterns, dancing just beyond the reach of algorithms. Perhaps the most heartbreaking clue lies in a 16th century Portuguese account describing a large stone with markings near the river's mouth. If it's the same stone, the inscription could date back over 500 years, long before modern Singapore existed. What stories did it tell about the people who lived here before colonialism reshaped the island? The fragment's surviving characters include what might be numerals, suggesting dates or quantities. But without the rest of the text, it's like trying to reconstruct a novel from a single torn page. The stone's defenders haven't given up. Recent scholarship focuses on comparing its symbols to lesser-known scripts from Sumatra or Java, hoping to find a Rosetta Stone-like bridge. Others suggest the inscription might be a hybrid, a creole of linguistic influences from the diverse merchants who passed through Singapore's harbor. But until another fragment surfaces, or some long-lost manuscript provides a key, the stone's message remains suspended between history and oblivion. It's a reminder that some voices from the past aren't just silent, they're fragmented, waiting for the right moment to speak. Buried deep in the soil of modern-day Romania, 3 small clay tablets tell a story that could rewrite history, if only we could agree on what they're saying. Unearthed in 1961 near the village of Tartaria, these palm-sized artifacts date back an astonishing 7,300 years, predating Mesopotamian cuneiform by over a millennium. At first glance, their surfaces seem unremarkable, scratched with simple lines, circles, and angular symbols, but look closer and the implications are staggering. Could these humble markings represent humanity's first attempt at writing? Or are we projecting modern hopes onto ancient doodles? The controversy lies in the symbols themselves. One tablet features a horned animal flanked by irregular markings. Another shows what might be a stylized altar with branching lines. The most debated piece displays a sequence of symbols arranged in rows, some resembling later Sumerian signs for grain or god. Proponents of the writing theory point to this apparent structure, arguing the symbols aren't random but follow deliberate patterns. They note how certain marks repeat at intervals, hinting at syntax. If true, this would mean literacy didn't dawn in Mesopotamia as long believed, but perhaps in the forests of the Balkan Neolithic. Skeptics counter with equal fervor. The symbols might be ritual notations, they argue, like a shaman's tally marks for ceremonies, or perhaps ownership tags for stored goods. After all, the tablets were found near a clay altar alongside charred bones, suggesting ceremonial use. Without longer texts or matching symbols elsewhere, there's no way to prove these marks encode speech. The writing could just be sacred iconography akin to Christian crosses or Buddhist mandalas, meant to evoke rather than narrate. The debate turns on a fundamental question: what transforms a symbol into writing? True writing represents specific words or sounds, allowing complex ideas to be transmitted across time and space. Proto-writing, like Native American winter counts or Inca quipu knots, conveys meaning but lacks this precision. The Tartaria Tablets hover in the gray zone between. Their symbols share eerie similarities with later scripts. The Sumerian tablet sign resembles one Tartaria marking, but is this evidence of a shared lineage or just coincidence? Adding fuel to the fire is the tablet's cultural context. The Vinča culture that produced them was astonishingly advanced for its time, with metalworking, organized settlements, and Europe's earliest known copper tools. Could they have also pioneered writing? Some researchers propose the symbols spread across Europe, influencing later scripts. Others dismiss this as wishful thinking, noting the lack of intermediate examples. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. Microscopic analysis reveals the symbols were incised when the clay was wet, suggesting intentional creation rather than accidental scratches. Yet 3D imaging can't tell us whether a spiral signifies harvest or simply the sun. The closest parallel comes from Despiglio's wooden tablet in Greece, with its own enigmatic markings from the same era. But two ambiguous artifacts don't make a writing system. Perhaps the most poignant detail is the tablet's fragility. Fired in a hearth rather than a kiln, they survived 7 millennia by sheer luck. How many others crumbled to dust, taking their secrets with them, until more examples surface, or someone cracks the code? The Tartaria Tablets remain a Rorschach test for archaeologists. Some see the birth of literature, others a false dawn. What's undeniable is their power to make us wonder how many other firsts lie buried, waiting to rewrite the stories we tell ourselves about the past. Imagine standing in the ruins of ancient Byblos, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth, where Phoenician traders once haggled over cedar wood and papyrus. Among the broken pottery and sun-bleached stones, you spot a peculiar clay tablet. Its surface is divided into neat rows, each filled with symbols that seem to straddle two worlds. Some resemble tiny Egyptian hieroglyphs, while others are stark, linear strokes. This is the Byblos syllabary, a script so enigmatic it might just be the missing link in one of humanity's greatest inventions, the alphabet. What makes this script extraordinary isn't just its age, carved around 1800 BC, but its place in the evolutionary chain of writing. Egyptian hieroglyphs were majestic but cumbersome. The Phoenician alphabet that followed was sleek and adaptable, birthing scripts from Greek to Latin to the letters you're reading now. But how did we leap from pictorial symbols to abstract letters? The Biblos syllabary could be the answer. Its symbols aren't full hieroglyphs, yet they're not quite letters either. There's something in between, a linguistic fossil capturing the moment pictures began shedding their skins to become sounds. Decipherment efforts have been tantalizingly partial. A handful of symbols have been tentatively matched to later Phoenician letters, like a crescent shape that might be the ancestor of D, or a zigzag that could foreshadow M. But here's the catch. Most of the syllabary's 90 signs remain stubbornly opaque. Without a bilingual inscription, a Rosetta Stone for Biblos, every translation attempt feels like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Some scholars believe the script logs temple offerings, pointing to recurring symbols that could denote quantities or gods. Others argue it's royal correspondence, citing its discovery near a palace complex. But until someone cracks the code, these theories are just educated guesses. The script's cultural context adds layers of intrigue. Byblos was a bustling hub where Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Aegean influences collided. Could the syllabary be a local experiment, a merchant's shorthand that never caught on? Or was it a deliberate hybrid, blending Egyptian prestige with Phoenician practicality? The city's role as a papyrus exporter raises another possibility. What if this script wasn't meant for clay at all, but for perishable scrolls that rotted away? Recent breakthroughs offer glimmers of hope. High-resolution scans reveal subtle chisel marks that hint at a standardized writing direction. Statistical analysis suggests certain symbols cluster like pronouns or prepositions. Yet the core mystery endures. How much of this script is pictorial and how much is phonetic? The answer could rewrite the story of writing itself, proving that alphabets didn't emerge fully formed, but evolved through trial, error, and cultural cross-pollination. Standing before the Byblos syllabary is like eavesdropping on a conversation between civilizations. Each stroke captures a moment of transformation, a silent negotiation between image and sound. For now, the tablet keeps its secrets, but somewhere in those cryptic lines lies the blueprint for every book, every text message, every word humanity has ever written. And that's a story worth decoding. Imagine a library where every book is made not of paper, but of strings, colorful strands of cotton and camelid wool, each tied into intricate knots that dangle like suspended secrets. This was the quipu system of the Inca, a civilization that ruled the Andes without ever putting pen to parchment. At first glance, these knotted cords resemble accounting tools, and indeed, many were used to track census data or grain stores. But scattered among these numerical records are quipus with baffling anomalies, knots tied in unexpected sequences, cords dyed in ceremonial colors, patterns that defy arithmetic logic. What if these weren't just calculators but canvases? The debate hinges on a radical idea that the Inca encoded stories in fiber. Spanish chroniclers wrote of quipucamayocs, keepers of the knots, who could read entire histories aloud from these cords. One account describes a quipu recounting the reign of a king, his battles woven into the twists. Another mentions legal documents transcribed in knots. But without living quipucamayocs to guide us, the system is a locked vault. Modern researchers face a unique challenge. Most undeciphered scripts leave visual clues, the curve of a hieroglyph, the angle of a cuneiform wedge. Quipus communicate through texture, tension, and torsion. A knot's position on the string, its tightness, even the spin of its fibers might carry meaning. Recent breakthroughs hint at staggering complexity. At the site of Incahuasi, archaeologists uncovered quipus buried with food stores, their knots matching the quantities of beans or corn in adjacent jars. But other quippers, like the enigmatic Rapaz collection, not in non-numerical clusters, their colors arranged in deliberate gradients. One theory suggests these could represent syllables, with hue and knot type combining to form words. Another proposes their mnemonics, triggering oral recitations of myths or laws. The most tantalizing clue, a colonial-era quipu from Peru's central coast, its knots reportedly translating a Catholic prayer, proof that the system could adapt to foreign concepts. The quest to crack the quipu code is as much about anthropology as cryptography. Andean cultures viewed textiles as sacred, imbued with the energy of their makers. Woven belts recorded personal histories, tapestries mapped cosmology. In this context, quippers weren't just records, they were living entities, their knots vibrating with the voices of ancestors. Some scholars argue they're not writing at all, but a parallel system as sophisticated as any script. The irony is profound. The Inca built Machu Picchu without mortar, engineered terraces that defy erosion, yet their primary medium for knowledge was perishable fiber. Of the thousands of quippers that once existed, fewer than 1,000 survive, many burned as pagan artifacts. Those that remain are time bombs. Exposure to light weakens the fibers, humidity erases dye. Each unread knot is a ticking clock, a sentence fading before we learn its alphabet. Perhaps the answer lies in the quipper's very design. Unlike static inscriptions, these cords demand interaction, to be held, folded, traced with fingers. Their meaning might not live in individual knots, but in the relationships between them, like musical notes in a symphony. Until we find a Rosetta quipu, perhaps a colonial document pairing knots with Spanish translations, the cords will keep their silence. But every frayed string that survives is a thread leading back to a civilization that thought in 3 dimensions, turning mathematics into art and accounting into epic poetry. And that's a language worth unraveling. Hidden away in the depths of a Hungarian nobleman's library for centuries, the Rohunk Codex isn't just a book, it's a visual fever dream. Imagine flipping through its 448 pages to find dense, looping symbols cascading alongside illustrations that shift from biblical scenes to sun-worshipping pagans, from crucifixions to what might be Hindu deities. It's as if someone took a medieval manuscript, tossed it into a cultural blender, and bound the results into a single, baffling volume. The script itself is unlike anything else in Europe. 200 symbols, some resembling old Hungarian runes, others echoing Sanskrit swirls, and a few that look like they belong on an alien artifact. This isn't just a cipher waiting to be cracked. It's a full-blown identity crisis in vellum and ink. Theories about its origins spiral as wildly as its glyphs. Discovered in the early 19th century in the small town of Rohunk, now Richnitz, Austria, the codex first surfaced in a private collection with no provenance, no cover letter, not even a whisper of where it came from. Some scholars insist it's a Renaissance-era hoax, a rich noble's prank meant to mock the era's obsession with ancient secrets. Others argue it's genuine, a sacred text from a heretical Christian sect, smuggling forbidden beliefs through coded imagery. The most tantalizing hypothesis, that it's a relic of the Kabbalah, its symbols encoding mystical Jewish teachings disguised as Christian art. But here's the catch. No amount of linguistic gymnastics can make the script align neatly with any known language. Statistical analyses reveal word lengths and symbol frequencies that defy classification, too repetitive for prose, too irregular for poetry. What makes the codex uniquely frustrating isn't just the script, but the art. Most undeciphered texts stand alone, but this one taunts us with visual clues. On one page, a figure raises a chalice near symbols that might say wine or blood. On another, warriors clash beneath what could be a crescent moon or perhaps a sickle. Do these illustrations hold the key, or are they red herrings meant to distract? Even the materials deepen the puzzle. The vellum is European, but the ink contains trace minerals found in Southeast Asia. The binding stitches match medieval Hungarian techniques, yet some pigments suggest a much older origin. Efforts to crack the code range from inspired to desperate. One team tried treating it as a substitution cipher, swapping symbols for Hungarian letters. Another used AI to scour global scripts for matches, turning up fleeting similarities to everything from Tibetan to Etruscan. A particularly bold claim suggested it was written in a lost Dacian language, but without corroborating texts, the theory crumbles. The closest anyone's come. In 2017, a linguist proposed that certain glyphs represented syllables, not letters, and tentatively translated a phrase as faith or light. But the academic community remains divided, with critics dismissing it as wishful pattern spotting. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the codex was never meant to be read at all. Some medieval mystics created fake sacred texts as meditative objects, their very indecipherability a path to spiritual insight. Could this be one such artifact, a book designed to provoke wonder, not comprehension? Or does it guard a secret so explosive its cipher had to be unbreakable? For now, the Rohonk Codex sits in Budapest's library of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, its pages whispering to anyone daring enough to listen. Every failed translation isn't just a setback, it's an invitation to look deeper, to question not just the symbols, but why we're so desperate to hear the voices they've silenced. Deep in the forests of the Great Lakes region, where birch trees stretch toward the sky like nature's parchment, the Ojibwe people left behind a silent library of knowledge, not bound in leather or etched on clay, but painted in bold red ochre and charcoal on the very skin of the land. These aren't mere doodles or random markings. Scrolled across bark, etched into rock faces, and carved into sacred medicine sticks are intricate pictographs. A canoe gliding beneath a crescent moon, a thunderbird with outstretched wings, a cluster of dots that might trace a constellation or a clan's lineage. To modern eyes, they might resemble simple drawings, but to the Ojibwe, these symbols were, and still are, a living dialogue between the physical and spiritual worlds. What makes these hieroglyphs so extraordinary isn't just their beauty, but their defiance of a persistent myth that indigenous North Americans lacked writing before European contact. The Ojibwe system turns that assumption on its head. Unlike alphabets that represent sounds, these pictographs convey ideas, stories, and ceremonies through imagery deeply rooted in Anishinaabe cosmology. A zigzag line isn't just a snake, it's a river's journey, a metaphor for life's twists. A series of arches might depict the layers of the sky world, each holding its own teachings. Yet for all we've pieced together, vast swaths of this visual language remain locked away, their full meanings lost to time. The tragedy, these weren't meant to be standalone texts. They were mnemonics triggered by oral tradition. The real books were the elders who could unfold each symbol into songs, stories, and instructions for living. When colonialism disrupted those chains of knowledge, the keys to full understanding vanished like smoke. Today, revitalization efforts offer glimmers of hope. Ojibwe scholars and knowledge keepers collaborate with linguists, comparing surviving scrolls like the Wigwasaback birch bark records kept by Midwiwin spiritual leaders, with oral histories still whispered in communities. Some symbols have been tentatively mapped. A circle with lines radiating outward signifies a ceremonial drum's heartbeat. A figure with horns might represent the trickster Nanabajo. But others resist interpretation, their contexts fractured by displacement and forced assimilation. The challenge is immense. Without the original storytellers, A single pictograph could hold 100 possible meanings. Is that cluster of dots a star map, a tally of ancestors, or a recipe for medicinal herbs? The stakes couldn't be higher. Deciphering these hieroglyphs isn't just an academic exercise, it's an act of cultural reclamation. Hidden in these symbols could be ecological wisdom, planting calendars tied to lunar cycles, or protocols for sustainable hunting. There might be healing rituals suppressed during the residential school era, or narratives of resilience that predate colonial contact by centuries. Every recovered glyph is a thread rewoven into the fabric of Ojibwe identity. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in the hieroglyphs' very nature. They weren't designed to be read in isolation, but to be performed, sung, and lived. In an age obsessed with static records, the Ojibwe system reminds us that some truths are too vibrant to be confined to paper. They breathe in the spaces between symbol and speaker, between earth and memory. And that's the real mystery, not just what these marks say, but how they might teach us to listen differently. Buried in the soil of a Romanian village, 3 unassuming clay fragments hold the power to shatter our understanding of human history. The Tartaria Tablets, each small enough to cradle in your palm, are etched with symbols so deceptively simple, they've ignited one of archaeology's fiercest debates. On one side, researchers who see in these markings the birth of writing, predating Mesopotamian cuneiform by over 2,000 years. On the other, skeptics who argue they're nothing more than ritual scratches, the prehistoric equivalent of doodling during a long ceremony. What transforms this academic spat into something extraordinary is the sheer weight of the question hanging over it. If these symbols truly represent language, then civilization's greatest invention, the ability to record thoughts across time, didn't dawn in the Fertile Crescent, but in the forests of Neolithic Europe. The tablets' physical details only deepen the intrigue. Unearthed in 1961 near a burial site, they bear symbols that seem to hover between art and alphabet. One shows a horned animal, its body bisected by a vertical line, a motif some connect to later Sumerian signs for deity. Another features a sequence of angular marks arranged in rows, their repetition hinting at deliberate structure. The most contentious symbol, a spiral resembling those found in Mesopotamian accounts of grain storage. Are these coincidences or evidence of a shared symbolic language stretching across continents? The Vinča culture that produced these tablets had no known contact with Sumer, yet the parallels are eerie. Context complicates the mystery further. The tablets were found alongside charred animal bones and a clay figuring clear signs of ritual activity. This has led some to propose they're sacred objects, their symbols acting as spiritual shorthand rather than true writing. Imagine a priestess pressing her thumb into wet clay to mark offerings to the gods, 3 lines for 3 sacrifices, a spiral for the cycle of seasons. But proponents of the writing theory counter with the tablet's sophistication. The symbols aren't random, they cluster in ways that suggest syntax, with some marks possibly functioning as determinatives, signs that categorize words, like the Egyptian hieroglyph for God following divine names. The debate hinges on definitions. What separates proto-writing symbols conveying basic information from full-fledged script capable of recording complex speech? The Vinca culture left behind thousands of similar symbols across southeastern Europe, often on spindle walls and pottery. Some appear standardized enough to suggest a system, a fish-shaped mark here, a branching tree there. But without longer texts or bilingual inscriptions, we're left guessing. It's like finding a single page from a dictionary. You recognize it as language, but can't reconstruct the grammar. Modern technology has added new layers to the puzzle. Microscopic analysis reveals the tablets were inscribed when the clay was still damp, then likely fired in a hearth. This intentional preservation suggests the markings held lasting importance. Spectrographic studies even detected traces of ochre in some grooves, hinting they might have been highlighted for visibility. Yet for all our tools, the central question remains unanswered. Are we looking at inventory lists, sacred hymns, or something far more intimate, a personal prayer pressed into clay 7 millennia ago? The stakes couldn't be higher. If the Tartaria symbols are writing, they rewrite history's timeline, suggesting literacy emerged independently in multiple regions. This wouldn't just shift credit from Mesopotamia to the Balkans, it would imply that humanity's cognitive leap toward symbolic communication happened earlier and more universally than we ever imagined. But until another cache of tablets surfaces, preferably with clearer context, these tiny fragments will keep their secrets. They're more than artifacts, they're Rorschach tests for our understanding of civilization's dawn. Every scholar who studies them sees something different, a receipt, a ritual, or perhaps the first trembling strokes of a revolution that would change the world forever. The Rongorongo script may be Easter Island's most famous unsolved puzzle, but whispers in the island's oral traditions speak of something even more elusive, a shadow script known as Kohau-Matu Mo Rongorongo. Unlike the wooden tablets scattered across museums, this legendary writing system leaves no physical trace, no carved glyphs, no weathered artifacts, just the persistent stories passed down through generations, hinting at a lost chapter in the Rapa Nui's intellectual history. Was it an early draft of Rongorongo, a primitive prototype that evolved into the symbols we recognize today? Or was it something entirely different, a parallel tradition, perhaps even a sacred script reserved for secrets too potent to carve into wood? The mystery deepens when you consider how precise these oral accounts are. Elders describe Kohau-Matu Mo Rongorongo as distinct from its more famous cousin, with symbols that flowed like vines rather than the angular glyphs of Rongorongo. Some legends claim it was used exclusively by the island's elite priests or kings, who guarded its knowledge as fiercely as they did the towering Moai statues. Others suggest it wasn't meant for permanent records at all, but for temporary messages like instructions scratched into sand or bark and then erased. If true, this would make it one of the most ephemeral writing systems in history, a language designed to vanish, leaving only echoes in the wind. What's fascinating isn't just the absence of evidence, but the cultural weight of its absence. The Rapa Nui didn't just lose a script, they lost a bridge to their own past. When European diseases and slave raids decimated the population in the 19th century, they didn't just take lives, they severed chains of memory. The last elders who might have recognized Kohau-Matu Mo Rongorongo died without passing on their knowledge, turning what might have been a Rosetta Stone into smoke. Today, the search for this ghost script isn't just about linguistics, it's about restitution. Every undeciphered Rongorongo tablet is a locked door, but Kohau-Matu Mo Rongorongo is a door we're not even sure existed, or if it did, whether it led to a room we'd recognize. Could modern technology conjure this lost script from the shadows? Ground-penetrating radar has revealed hidden chambers beneath Easter Island's stone platforms. What if one holds a fragment of bark or cloth inscribed with these elusive symbols? Or perhaps the answer lies in the island's caves, where humidity might preserve organic materials that elsewhere would have crumbled. The irony is tantalizing. A writing system that deliberately avoided permanence might yet be waiting, not in the open air, but in the silent dark, where time forgets to erase. Until then, Kohau-Matu Mo Rongorongo remains a paradox, a language remembered but unreadable, a script described but unseen. It's a reminder that history isn't just written in stone or ink, but in the fragile spaces between memory and loss. And for the Rapa Nui, that space is where their ancestors still speak, urging us to listen not just to what survives, but to what might yet be found. Long before the cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia became the gold standard of ancient record-keeping, another civilization was scratching symbols into clay with equal ambition and far less lasting success. Enter the Proto-Elamite script, a system of wedge-shaped markings that emerged in what's now southwestern Iran around 3100 BCE, making it one of the world's earliest attempts at writing. At first glance, these tablets might seem like primitive cousins to Sumerian cuneiform, same clay medium, similar angular strokes, but look closer and the differences scream for attention. Where cuneiform evolved into a versatile tool for literature, law, and diplomacy, Proto-Elamite stalled out, its symbols frozen in time like a language trapped in amber. The mystery isn't just what these markings say, it's why they vanished so abruptly. Over 4,000 Proto-Elamite tablets have been excavated, many from the ancient city of Susa. They're packed with numerical notations and recurring signs that suggest bureaucratic precision, livestock tallies, grain allocations, maybe even labor records. But unlike cuneiform, which grew more sophisticated over centuries, Proto-Elamite symbols never developed phonetic values. They remained stuck in a limbo between pictographs and true writing, as if their creators had the idea but not the infrastructure to take it further. Was this script a revolutionary experiment cut short by political collapse, or a cautionary tale about what happens when innovation outpaces utility? Decipherment efforts hit a unique roadblock. With cuneiform, scholars had the luxury of later bilingual inscriptions. Proto-Elamite offers no such cheat sheet. Its symbols share vague similarities with early Sumerian accounting marks, but the overlaps are just tantalizing enough to mislead. Some signs clearly represent numbers, clusters of circles, and wedges counting units of grain or jars of oil. Others might log commodities, a schematic cow here, a stylized sheaf of wheat there, but the system's grammar, if it even had one, remains opaque, the script's most distinctive feature. A bizarre hand-holding motif where human figures link arms in rows. Are these deities, workers, a metaphor for trade agreements? Without context, they're ink blots in clay. Theories about its demise range from pragmatic to dramatic. Maybe the system was too cumbersome, its symbols too abstract for daily use. Or perhaps the Elamite elite abandoned it as Sumerian influence grew, swapping local notation for the prestige of cuneiform. The darkest possibility, that Proto-Elamite wasn't meant to stand alone, that it served as a mnemonic aid for an oral accounting tradition that died with its speakers. Whatever the case, its legacy is haunting. This wasn't just a failed script, it was a road not taken in the history of writing. Had it flourished, our modern alphabets might trace their roots not through Mesopotamia, but through the dusty plains of ancient Iran. Yet Proto-Elamite's very failure makes it invaluable. It's a reminder that writing wasn't some inevitable human invention, but a fragile experiment that could have unfolded or unraveled in countless ways. Those 4,000 tablets aren't just administrative debris. They're the ghostly echoes of a system that dared to invent a language, then forgot how to speak it. And that's the real lesson here. Sometimes the most fascinating scripts aren't the ones that change the world, but the ones that whisper what might have been. Imagine holding a tortoise shell older than the pyramids, its surface etched with delicate markings that seem to dance between decoration and declaration. This is the enigma of the Jiahu symbols, a collection of 24 distinct signs carved into shells and bones around 6000 BCE, predating China's famous oracle bone script by over 4 millennia. Discovered in 1985 at a Neolithic site in Henan province, these markings aren't just ancient graffiti. They're a tantalizing puzzle. Are we looking at the earliest flickers of Chinese writing, or something far more elusive, a system of symbols that never quite crossed the threshold into true language? What makes these carvings extraordinary isn't just their age, but their eerie familiarity. Some symbols bear uncanny resemblances to later Chinese characters, a cross-shaped mark echoing the modern character for 10, a zigzag line that could be a primitive ancestor of the glyph for water. The implications are staggering. If these connections aren't coincidental, the Jiahu symbols might represent the world's longest continuous writing tradition, a thread stretching from prehistoric ritual objects to the characters on your smartphone screen. But here's the catch: without context, without longer inscriptions to reveal how these signs functioned in practice, we're left guessing. Are they property marks, ritual notations, or the first trembling steps toward a full writing system? The debate hinges on a fundamental question: when does a symbol become writing? True writing represents specific words or sounds, allowing complex ideas to be transmitted across time and space. The Jiahu symbols, isolated and brief, might never have achieved this. Yet their sophistication suggests more than idle doodling. Found alongside flutes made from crane bones, the oldest playable musical instruments ever discovered, they hint at a culture already exploring abstraction, turning sound into melody and thought into mark. Some archaeologists argue the symbols are proto-writing, a bridge between simple tally marks and the oracle bone script that emerged millennia later. Others see them as part of a symbolic toolkit shared across Neolithic China, with regional variations fading as the Shang dynasty standardized characters. The cultural context deepens the intrigue. Jiahu was no backwater. It was a thriving settlement with rice cultivation, alcohol production, and evidence of long-distance trade. These weren't people scratching at survival. They were building a complex society that perhaps needed to record, to remember, to communicate beyond speech. The tortoise shells themselves hold clues. In later Chinese tradition, turtle shells were used for divination, the famous oracle bones that bear the earliest confirmed Chinese writing. Could the Jiahu carvings be precursors to this practice, an early attempt to inscribe questions to the spirit world? Or were they personal amulets, their meanings known only to the individuals who wore them? Modern technology has revealed startling details. Microscopic analysis shows the symbols were incised with stone tools, their lines deliberate and practiced. Some shells bear traces of red pigment, suggesting the carvings were highlighted for visibility or ceremonial use. Yet for all our tools, the central mystery endures. Without a Rosetta Stone linking these symbols to known scripts, their meanings may remain locked away. Perhaps the most poignant lesson of the Jiahu symbols lies in their fragility. They survived 6,000 years buried in the earth, only to emerge into a world that can't fully understand them. They challenge our assumptions about the linear progression of writing, hinting at false starts and lost experiments in humanity's quest to pin down thought. In their silent lines, we glimpse not just the origins of Chinese script, but the universal human urge to make marks that outlast us, to say, across the abyss of time, we were here. And that, in itself, is a message worth deciphering. Scattered across the ruins of Neolithic villages in Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria, the Vinča symbols form one of Europe's oldest and most hotly debated mysteries. Picture a clay pot or spindle wall, its surface marked with angular slashes, crosses, and stick figure animals. To the untrained eye, they might look like random scratches, but their consistency tells a different story. These aren't isolated doodles. Over 2,000 artifacts bear these symbols, some repeating in combinations so deliberate they've ignited a firestorm among archaeologists. Are we staring at Europe's first attempt at writing, or something far more enigmatic? What makes these markings so provocative isn't just their age, dating back to around 5000 BCE, but their eerie sophistication. Unlike cave paintings, which depict the world as our ancestors saw it, the Vinča symbols are abstract. Zigzags that could signify water or boundaries, branching lines resembling trees or family lineages, even swirls that might represent celestial cycles. Their precision suggests intent, but intent for what? The theories split like river channels. One camp insists these are property marks, akin to a farmer branding his tools. Another argues they're ritual symbols, shorthand for prayers or offerings to forgotten gods. But the most tantalizing idea, that they're fragments of a true script, a Neolithic language carved into clay long before the pyramids rose. The evidence teeters between compelling and confounding. Some symbols reappear across vast distances, hinting at a shared cultural code. A zigzag on a pot in Serbia mirrors one in Romania, as if spelling the same word. Yet without longer texts, no, Vinča Rosetta Stone. To bridge the gap, the patterns dissolve into speculation. Imagine finding a single page from a modern book with no title or context. You recognize the alphabet, but the story slips through your fingers. That's the Vinča dilemma. Adding fuel to the debate is the Vinča culture itself. These weren't hunter-gatherers scratching out survival. They lived in dense settlements with multi-room houses, crafted exquisite figurines, and traded obsidian across the Balkans. A society this complex might well have needed writing, or been on the cusp of inventing it. Yet unlike Mesopotamians who baked their bureaucracy into indestructible clay tablets, the Vinča left their marks on perishable goods. Pots broke, spindles wore out. What if their true documents were painted on wood or leather, lost to time's hunger? Modern technology offers faint glimmers of hope. Statistical analyzers reveal symbol frequencies akin to early writing systems, with some signs acting like core characters that recur in predictable ways. Archaeologists have even mapped hotspots where certain symbols cluster like a tavern sign repeating near hearths, suggesting a word for food or gathering. But without a bilingual inscription or a sudden trove of longer texts, the Vinča symbols remain a locked door. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that they were never meant to be writing at all. Some linguists propose their proto-writing, a bridge between art and alphabet, conveying concepts but not speech. Think of highway signs today. A fork and spoon means restaurant, no words needed. Could the Vinča have used symbols the same way? A zigzag for river, a cross for sacred, a bird for message. If so, these marks aren't a failed script, but a thriving system that simply didn't need to evolve further. The truth may lie buried in the Balkan soil, waiting for a stroke of luck, a tablet with symbols paired with images, or a cache of artifacts that reveals their grammar. Until then, the Vinča symbols stand as a reminder that writing isn't a single invention, but a mosaic of experiments. Some flourished into alphabets. Others, like these cryptic scratches, remain whispers from the shadows of prehistory, challenging us to listen harder. Beneath the towering moai statues that have made Easter Island famous, another mystery lingers in the shadows, literally. While Rongorongo's wooden tablets steal the spotlight, the island's labyrinthine caves hide a parallel script etched directly into the volcanic rock. These petroglyphs aren't mere echoes of the tablet glyphs. They're a visual dialect all their own. Some mirror Rongorongo's birdmen and crescent moons, while others spiral into patterns found nowhere else on the island. Were these carvings a classroom for apprentice scribes practicing their craft in secret, a territorial map marking sacred or forbidden spaces, or perhaps something more intimate, a visual prayer left by pilgrims seeking solace in the earth's embrace? The caves themselves amplify the enigma. Unlike the open-air ceremonial platforms where Rongorongo tablets were likely displayed, these subterranean galleries feel deliberately hidden. Ana Kakinga, the Cave of Two Windows, forces visitors to crawl through narrow tunnels before revealing its walls adorned with petroglyphs, a stark contrast to the Moai's public grandeur. This secrecy fuels theories. Some scholars argue the cave scripts were esoteric knowledge reserved for initiates. Others note their proximity to freshwater sources, suggesting practical notations about seasonal springs. But the most tantalizing clues come from Rapa Nui oral traditions, which speak of talking stones that guided travelers or warned of danger. Could these petroglyphs be that voice? What makes the cave scripts uniquely frustrating is their hybrid nature. At Ana Te Pahu, a sprawling lava tube, petroglyphs mingle with later charcoal drawings, creating a palimpsest of symbolism across centuries. Some glyphs are meticulously pecked into the rock with stone tools, their edges sharp after generations of exposure. Others are faint, as if the artists hesitated or were interrupted. The overlapping styles hint at evolution, a script adapting to new needs or influences, yet without a Rosetta Stone to link them to Rongorongo or oral histories, their grammar remains opaque. Are the repeating fishhooks at Orongo cave a tally of catches, or symbols of the creator god Make? Does the zigzag threading through Ana Kai Tangota's ceiling chart an underground river or a spirit's path? Modern technology offers flickers of insight. 3D imaging has revealed tool marks invisible to the naked eye, proving some glyphs were recarved over time as if updated. Spectral analysis even detected traces of pigment in a few grooves, suggesting the caves might have been color-coded red for sacred, black for practical. But the biggest breakthrough might come from an unexpected source, the island's re-emerging Rapa Nui language. As elders revive traditional chants, some lyrics describe patterns eerily similar to the cave glyphs. A chant about the birdman competition, for example, mentions wings that curve like the moon, a phrase that could decode a recurring petroglyph motif. Yet the caves guard their secrets jealously. Unlike Rongorongo, which suffered from colonial looting, these inscriptions remain rooted in place, their context intact. That's what makes them so precious and so vulnerable. Salt erosion and tourist touch are slowly erasing the finer details. Each fading line is a syllable lost from a story we're only beginning to suspect exists. The tragedy isn't just that we can't read these messages yet. It's that time is ticking louder than ever and the stones are speaking softer. But in their silence, they offer a lesson. Sometimes writing isn't just about what's said, but where it's hidden. And Easter Island's caves, with their shadowed walls and half-lit glyphs, might just be the most eloquent library we've never learned to read. Deep in the jagged cliffs of Egypt's western desert, where the wind carves its own language into the stone, two weathered inscriptions whisper a secret that could rewrite the history of writing itself. The Wadi El Hall carvings, etched around 1800 BC, don't look like much at first, just a handful of symbols scratched beside an ancient desert road. But lean in closer and something extraordinary emerges. These aren't hieroglyphs, those elaborate pictorial scripts reserved for temples and tombs. There's something leaner, sharper, a stripped-down set of symbols that seem to pulse with the DNA of every alphabet you've ever used. What makes these markings so electrifying isn't just their age, but their audacious simplicity. Hieroglyphs required years of training to master, with hundreds of signs representing everything from sounds to whole concepts. The Wadi el-Hol symbols, by contrast, could fit on one hand, a zigzag like a lightning bolt, a looping curve resembling a shepherd's crook, a stick figure house with a single doorway. To the untrained eye, they might look primitive, but to linguists they're revolutionary, a seismic leap from pictorial writing to something far more versatile, an alphabet. The implications are staggering. If these carvings are what some scholars believe a proto-alphabetic system, they could be the Rosetta Stone of linguistic evolution, bridging the gap between Egypt's hieroglyphs and the Phoenician script that later birthed Greek, Hebrew, and even the letters you're reading now. The theory goes like this: Semitic workers or mercenaries stationed in Egypt, familiar with hieroglyphs but needing a faster way to write, distilled them into a streamlined set of signs representing consonant sounds. That shepherd's crook, it might be the ancestor of the letter A, the house symbol, possibly an early B. This wasn't just shorthand, it was a cognitive revolution, trading pictographic complexity for phonetic efficiency. But not everyone's convinced. Skeptics point to the inscription's isolation, just two brief carvings in a desert canyon, with no other examples to confirm a wider system. Could they be random graffiti or a cryptic code used by a tiny group never meant to spread? The debate hinges on a single, tantalizing detail. One Wadi el-Hol symbol appears to depict a human head with an exaggerated eye, a motif later found in Phoenician as the letter ayin, meaning eye. Is this continuity proof of a direct lineage or just coincidence? The desert itself adds layers to the mystery. Wadi el-Hol wasn't some forgotten backwater. It was a bustling thoroughfare linking the Nile Valley to distant oases. The inscriptions perch near a rock shelter that once housed travelers, suggesting they might have been a communal effort, a lingua franca for traders and soldiers who spoke different languages but needed to communicate. Imagine a Canaanite merchant scratching a symbol for water next to a well, or a Nubian guard leaving his mark to signal safe passage. In this light, the carvings aren't just linguistic artifacts, they're snapshots of a multicultural crossroads where writing shed its ceremonial robes and got to work. Recent discoveries keep the debate alive. In 2021, archaeologists unearthed pottery shards near the Sinai with similar symbols, hinting at a broader network of early alphabetic experimentation. Meanwhile, AI-assisted pattern recognition has identified recurring sequences in the Wadi el-Hol carvings that suggest grammatical structure, not just isolated signs but deliberate groupings. Could these be names, prayers? Even the humblest grocery list would be a treasure, proving the script was used for everyday life, not just ritual. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Wadi el-Hol is indeed the alphabet's cradle, it means our most democratic tool for sharing ideas, the simple act of combining letters into words, was born not in a royal court, but in the dust and chaos of a desert trade route. It's a reminder that writing's greatest leaps often come from the margins, from people who needed to speak across borders and didn't have time for scribble schools. The wind has erased much of Wadi el-Hol's story, but those stubborn symbols remain, a testament to human ingenuity, etched not in gold or marble, but in the enduring language of stone. Stretching across the vast expanse of the Sahara, from the Atlas Mountains to the rocky outcrops of the Canary Islands, the Libyco-Berber script etches its silent story into stone. These angular, geometric symbols, some resembling stick figures, others like zigzagging rivers frozen in time, aren't just random scratches. They're the fingerprints of a civilization that thrived where few could survive, a writing system that defies the stereotype of Africa as a continent without written history. Carved onto funerary stelae, boulders, and even cliff faces, these inscriptions pulse with questions. Who were the scribes that wielded chisels under the desert sun? What stories did they burn into rock for eternity? And why does their language still resist our grasp centuries after the last carver laid down their tools? The script's mystery begins with its origins. Some scholars trace its roots to the Berber kingdoms that once dominated North Africa, arguing the symbols evolved organically from local pictographs, perhaps tally marks for livestock or clan sigils that gradually formalized into letters. Others spot the ghost of Phoenician traders in its strokes, pointing to similarities with ancient Punic script. After all, Carthage, the great Phoenician colony, ruled these coasts for centuries. Could Libyan merchants have adapted their conqueror's alphabet, twisting it into something uniquely their own? The debate isn't just academic, it's a battle over identity. If the script is purely Berber, it shatters old colonial myths that Africa's intellectual achievements were borrowed. If it's hybrid, it speaks to a cosmopolitan Sahara where cultures collided and cross-pollinated. Decipherment efforts tease like mirages. A handful of characters have been tentatively matched to modern Berber languages. A circle with a dot might mean sun. A downward stroke could signify water. But without a bilingual inscription, a Saharan Rosetta Stone, the majority of texts remain frustratingly opaque. The script structure adds another layer of intrigue. Some inscriptions read right to left, others left to right, and a few even spiral inward like a snail's shell. Was this flexibility a feature or a flaw? Did direction signify genre funerary texts versus land claims? Or was it simply scribbled preference? The variation suggests a living, evolving system, not some static code handed down from on high. Context offers tantalizing clues. Many inscriptions cluster around ancient trade routes, particularly near oases where caravans would rest. Could they be territorial markers like no trespassing signs for rival clans? Others adorn tombs, their symbols arranged in vertical columns like poetic verses for the dead. At the ruined city of Dugga in Tunisia, a bilingual stele pairs Libyco-Berber with Punic, but the text is so formulaic, likely a royal dedication, that it's like finding a key that only opens one door. The script's decline is as enigmatic as its rise. By the medieval period, it had largely vanished, replaced by Arabic script as Islam spread across North Africa. But in remote pockets like the Canary Islands, Guanche people versions of the script persisted into the 15th century, a last gasp of a writing system that once unified the desert's scattered kingdoms. Today, modern Berber activists revive these symbols as emblems of cultural pride, stamping them on flags and textbooks. Yet the ancient texts themselves remain stoically silent, their full stories buried under layers of sand and time. What's haunting isn't just the script's resistance to translation, but what its untold narratives might reveal. These carvings could rewrite our understanding of trans-Saharan trade, documenting alliances or conflicts lost to oral tradition. They might hold medicinal knowledge, poetry, or even early scientific observations from a culture that tracked the stars across the desert's boundless night. Every undeciphered line is a closed door, and behind it, an entire world waiting to be remembered. Buried in the sun-baked hills of Tuscany, nestled alongside funerary urns and bronze mirrors, lie thin sheets of gold that shimmer with the ghostly whispers of a lost civilization. The Tartaria Tablets, 3 delicate plaques discovered in 1964 near an ancient Etruscan port, aren't just artifacts. They're a linguistic tightrope strung between the known and the unknowable. 2 are inscribed with the Etruscans' cryptic script, a language that has taunted scholars for centuries. The 3rd, a near-miraculous gift, a parallel text in Phoenician, a known language, offering the slimmest of keys to unlock its golden companions. At first glance, this should have been the Rosetta Stone of Etruscan studies. The Phoenician inscription clearly honors the goddess Astarte, suggesting the Etruscan texts are religious dedications. But here's where the plot thickens. While we can match some Etruscan words, Tinia, their sky god, appears alongside Astarte's name, the grammar dissolves into fog. It's like hearing a familiar melody played on an alien instrument. The notes are recognizable, but the arrangement defies comprehension. The tablets dangle before us, the cruelest tease in archaeology, bilingualism without full translation. What makes these plaques so tantalizing isn't just their words, but their medium. Gold wasn't chosen by accident. For the Etruscans, this wasn't merely a durable writing surface, it was a conduit to the divine. The tablets were nailed to the walls of a temple at Pyrgi, their surfaces catching the flicker of oil lamps to dazzle worshippers. Every gleam would have reinforced their sacred power, turning written words into living incantations. Were they vows between kings and gods, treaties sealing political alliances under divine witness, or perhaps a high priest's ritual calendar marking celestial events lost to time? The Etruscan language itself is a hall of mirrors. We've deciphered their alphabet adapted from Greek letters, but the vocabulary remains stubbornly opaque. Unlike Linear B, which was cracked by recognizing archaic Greek, Etruscan has no clear linguistic relatives. Those gold plaques are like overhearing one half of a phone conversation. We catch names and verbs, but the connective tissue, the prepositions, the subtleties of tense and mood slips through our fingers. Take the recurring phrase, Sathete Thetoora, found on votive objects across Etruria. Does it mean sacred offering, or is it a legal formula akin to by order of the council? Without more texts, every translation is a shot in the dark. Modern technology has peeled back some layers. Multispectral imaging reveals tool marks invisible to the naked eye, showing the tablets were inscribed by multiple hands, perhaps a master scribe and apprentices learning the sacred script. X-ray fluorescence confirms the gold's origin, not local Tuscan veins, but imported nuggets hammered thin as rose petals. This was a prestige project, a statement of wealth and piety meant to endure. Yet for all our tools, the core mystery persists. Why did such a sophisticated civilization, one that taught Rome the arts of architecture and augury, leave so few lengthy texts? The Etruscans wrote on linen books, their words woven into fabric. Not a single page survives. The Pyrgi tablets, then, are more than linguistic puzzles. They're fragments of a world, where writing wasn't just communication, but alchemy transforming mortal speech into eternal metal. Every untranslated line is a door to a parallel Italy, one where Tinia, not Jupiter, ruled the heavens. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. Some languages refuse to be confined by dictionaries. They shimmer at the edges of understanding, reminding us that the past isn't a code to be cracked, but a conversation we're still learning to hear. The 24 untranslated stone inscriptions we've explored are more than historical curiosities. They're windows into lost worlds. Each represents a culture's attempt to communicate across time, a voice silenced by the ages. While technology and collaboration offer hope for future breakthroughs, some mysteries may never be solved. Yet, the pursuit itself enriches our understanding of human ingenuity. What other secrets lie buried, waiting for their Rosetta Stone? The journey of decipherment is far from over, and perhaps you'll be part of the next great discovery. Until then, the stones keep their silence, but here's the thing about silence, it's never truly empty. Every undeciphered inscription hums with possibility, a reminder that history isn't just what we know, but what we're still learning. Think of the Rongorongo script, its glyphs frozen mid-conversation, or the Indus Valley seals, their brief symbols holding entire economies in suspension. These aren't dead ends, they're invitations. Every time a scholar pores over the Wadi El Hol carvings or an amateur linguist tackles the Voynich manuscript, they're adding another thread to the tapestry of human connection. The beauty of these puzzles lies in their stubborn refusal to yield. They force us to question assumptions about intelligence, about progress, even about what constitutes writing. The Vinča symbols might be proto-writing or ritual marks, but they challenge us to expand our definition of literacy. The quipu knots of the Inca remind us that language isn't always about ink and paper. Sometimes it's woven into fiber, tied into existence. And the Jiahu carvings, they whisper that writing might have bloomed independently in shadows we've yet to illuminate. Technology will keep pushing boundaries. AI algorithms now scan symbols for hidden patterns, while multispectral imaging teases faded ink from ancient parchment. But machines alone won't crack these codes. It takes human curiosity, the kind that wonders why a Bronze Age trader in Byblos needed a hybrid script, or what a Neolithic artist in Despiglio meant to say with those spirals. That's why these stones matter. They're not just relics, they're mirrors. Stare into their glyphs long enough, and you'll see our own obsession with legacy staring back. So what's next? Maybe a farmer's plow will unearth another Phaistos Disc, or a child's playful dig will reveal the missing link for the Harapan script. Or maybe, just maybe, the key has been hiding in plain sight all along, tucked into some overlooked corner of a museum vault. The thrill isn't just in the solving, but in the seeking. Because every untranslated stone is a promise. Somewhere beneath the dust of centuries, a voice is waiting to speak again. And when it does, the past won't just speak to us. It might rewrite everything we thought we knew.